Today on the Fresh Brew Run Club, I'm talking about my top 5 worst runs ever. So I made an earlier video about how running is not always about being the fastest. Sometimes there are other goals and other reasons why someone wants to run. So in the spirit of talking about not being fast, I wanted to talk about my top 5 absolute worst runs ever. So starting with number 5 was the 2019 Detroit Free Press Half Marathon. So I signed up for the half marathon. I trained all year. I felt like I was in really good shape. I got to the half marathon, which takes place downtown Detroit, and then you cross into Canada, and then you cross back. It's an awesome route. I've talked about this before in a previous video that I will link below. But what I didn't realize was the pace that I wanted to run does not have pacers. And that was something that I was kind of depending on. A pacer is someone who runs in a big race like a marathon, and they carry a little sign that shows how fast that they're running, and you kind of stick with that group and then you run the same pace throughout. I realized in the group that I was in, there was no pacer. So I was just on my own for the start. I ran for my first mile like one of the fastest miles I've ever ran. And my GPS at the beginning was kind of messed up because there's a lot of people, a lot of GPS signals. And I crossed that mile and I saw that mile time and I realized I am in humongous trouble because the first 2 miles are relatively flat, but then, after mile 2, you cross the Ambassador Bridge into Canada, which is like a mile-long uphill. I got through that uphill and I realized I'm done. 3 miles in, I have 10 miles to go, and I am completely, absolutely cooked. There's nothing worse than being at the beginning of a race and knowing you just don't have it. You ran too fast in the first 2 miles and you're absolutely done. And now you have to suffer for the next 3 miles knowing that you made a massive mistake. And that's exactly what it was. It was not a fun run. I had a horrible time. However, it wasn't so bad, and this is why it's only number 5 on my list, because the next week I ran a half marathon on my own and I was actually able to get my PR. So it ended well, but that was not a fun race to go through. So coming in at number 4 was the 2005 Volkslave. This is my bib. I've talked about this in a previous video before as well, but I ran horribly. So I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided to wear basketball shorts and a 100% cotton t-shirt. It was like 95 degrees and humid. I ran absolutely horrible. I felt awful. I had all this baggy material. I embarrassed myself in front of my cross-country team. It was an absolute disaster. And from that point on, I said, you know what? No more 100% cotton shirts, despite the fact that I'm, repping the city that I'm from, as if anyone cares about that. I'm going to take running more seriously. And it was kind of a turning point for me. But in the moment, not fun at all. So coming in at number 3 was the 2005 Muskrat Invitational. This was a race that I ran in high school, and at the time, I was still wearing glasses, which wasn't that big of a deal, except for the fact that it was raining and extremely humid. So what happens when you're trying to run and it's extremely humid and raining at the same time? Your glasses fog up and you can't see anything, which when you're running on a trail in the woods, that's kind of a problem. So I ended up taking my glasses and throwing them to my dad along the course because being somewhat unable to see was at least better than not being able to see at all. And as a result, I set up an appointment with the eye doctor and quickly got contacts, which I have been wearing ever since. So not fun in the moment, but again, it sort of laid the groundwork for myself, the modern runner who not only can see things on the trail, but also doesn't get foggy glasses the second the humidity crosses 50%. So the number 2 worst run I've ever had came when I was in grade school, probably 3rd grade, I'm gonna say. So I was running for my cross-country team, and the night before the race, I had Chicken Shack, which I love Chicken Shack. It's fantastic, but when you're looking for a pre-race meal, greasy chicken and potatoes loaded with salt and butter are not exactly the best meal. I would not recommend that, and I ended up paying the price as a 3rd grader. Just did not feel well. I don't think I threw up, but I'm also not sure that I actually finished the race. I just remember being miserable. So that was sort of the first time that I ever paid the price for eating something I shouldn't have the night before a race. I should have learned from that as we go into the number 1 worst race of my entire life, which was the state cross-country meet in 2005. So this is a huge race. There's a ton of runners. There's a ton of teams. There were 243 total participants in this race, and I finished in 236th place, 8th from last. Which, again, I know I've talked about how running is not about being the fastest all the time, but when it comes to the state track meet and you're 15 years old, it's kind of important to you to finish fast. This run was an absolute disaster from start to finish, and there's a couple reasons why. And again, I don't want to make too many excuses, but you know what? I'm going to make too many excuses here. So the first thing that went wrong, this race takes place in the absolute middle of nowhere in Michigan. I get it. You want to have a central location that can host a ton of people. MIS makes a lot of sense. However, it meant that we stayed in a hotel the night before, and there's just something not great about staying in a strange bed the night before the biggest race of your entire life in a hotel filled with a bunch of high school kids just running around causing chaos. I got almost no sleep that night. So that was the first mistake I made. The second mistake I made was my pre-race meal. And again, I should have learned back in 3rd grade when I ate Chicken Shack before one of my races, maybe try to eat healthy before the race. That would have helped definitely, but instead I decided to go to a restaurant called Fazoli's. And I'm sure Fazoli's is great on its own if you're looking for a quick fast food Italian meal. If you're looking for something quick, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, I have no idea. If you're running the state cross country race, don't eat Fazoli's the night before the race. Now, this was back in the day when people thought that carbo loading was a good thing. I knew this was one of those races where I knew right from the start, I just don't have it. And then you have to endure the entire race as just one by one people start passing you by. And it's just that sinking feeling of I have worked my entire season for this day, and I ended up finishing 8th from last. So that was an absolute disaster. However, a learning experience. Nutrition is something you want to take seriously. The next 2 years, I drove up the morning of and slept in my own bed the night before. I ate healthy. I was much more prepared. I wasn't as nervous. I mean, it's an overwhelming race as is. You know, Fazoli's and strange smoky hotel room aside, it's a big race. It's nerve-wracking. My nerves were at an all-time high, and I just could not handle the pressure. Now, looking back on it, I think it's kind of funny that I almost finished dead last in the entire state cross-country final, but at the moment, it was not so funny. So those are my top 5 worst runs. What are your worst runs? Was it a complete collapse at the biggest stage, or was it just an average run that turned into a complete nightmare? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear those stories. Maybe I'll make a video about some of your worst running experiences, but those are mine. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you soon. The pace I wanted to run does not have pacers.